Okay, I'd like to welcome you all this morning to June's GATE Equity Webinar 101. I'm Bonnie Zimmerman. I'm a program specialist at OSPI, and today I'm sitting in for Kepi Anderson, who is unable to be here. This meeting is being recorded and streaming live on YouTube. The PowerPoint is posted on OSPI's GATE Equity Webinar webpage if you want to follow along. Thank you, Ronnie, for putting that in the chat. We chose this topic because we've all learned this year how important it is to have authentic family-school partnerships. As we strive to be data-driven, the experiences of students and families are a huge asset to informing change ideas and working together to create the supports students need to be successful. Closed captioning is available. We try to make it available for all of our webinars. If you have trouble turning closed captioning on, please let us know in the chat and we'll see if we can get somebody there to assist you. OSPI has a YouTube channel where we post all of our recordings. If you can't make it or want to share a recording, all you have to do is subscribe by clicking. All you have to do is subscribe, and then by clicking the little bell, you'll get an alert every time we post a new video. We love to see our listeners get clock hours for joining us. So if you're planning to watch both webinars live today, you can use the link in the chat to get into PD Enroller and collect your clock hours. We want you to know that if you just attend one of the webinars today, you still are eligible for 1.5 clock hours if you stay for the entire webinar. And it's helpful to us if you introduce yourself with your name, your role, and school district or the area you're from. All you have to do is click on your name in the participants list, select more, and rename yourself. Then we can see who's here. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of System and School Improvement within the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. At OSPI, we believe each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. The GATE Equity webinar was created with the purpose of highlighting practices that increase access to education and ultimately to graduation. We live in a beautiful place, especially here in Olympia today. There are a few clouds in the sky, but it is very pretty. Where I live is on the traditional lands of the Nisqually tribe, but this morning I'm in the office, so I'm coming to you from the land of the Squaxin Island tribe. We ask you, the participants of this meeting, also honor the traditional lands in which each of you are located. And if you're interested in learning more about land acknowledgements, we really encourage you to enter into tribal consultation with your local tribes. In our office, we've created a cultural acknowledgement that helps to ground our work. We want to acknowledge the pain and trauma resulting from over 400 years of racism in the United States and against people of the African diaspora. We stand with our communities of color during these unprecedented times of civil unrest, especially those who identify as and/or are categorized as Black and/or African American. We will continue to center our work in leading with racial equity. We want to offer a moment of silence and afterwards honor the space for people from communities of color to respond to this acknowledgement first. Then we invite allies and others to communicate their comments after. Feel free to use the chat box if you choose. We invite accountability and partnership and hope you'll support us as we continue to grow. We're going to pause for 1 minute now to reflect. thank you for honoring our tribute to our coworkers and our families who are in this position. And we're now going to open the floor for our listeners from communities of color to respond first. You can unmute yourself if you have something you want to share. If not, we'll move on. And you can continue throughout the webinar, share in the chat. Today, our objectives are to learn how to design empathy interviews, work with colleagues from across the state to design your own empathy interview questions, learn a protocol to process empathy interview results, and learn some options to engage multilingual student, family, and community voice. Kathy Anderson is the Graduation Equity Program Supervisor and Gate Equity Webinar Facilitator and all around brainchild. This is her brainchild. So we are sorry she can't be here today, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Our System and School Improvement Data Practices Project Manager, Travis Wentworth, will partner with Bethany Martinez, Director of Multilingual and Multicultural Services at Wahluke School District. Welcome, Travis and Bethany, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk about empathy interviews with us. We'd like to know our audience so that we can tailor our content to your needs. We're also using polls to take attendance for clock hours, so thank you in advance for participating. We'll give you a couple of minutes here. Let me launch the poll. Yes, there we go. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to complete the survey. And I want to warn you, you have to answer all three of the questions before hitting submit or it doesn't record. And Travis, while we're doing this, you want to take control of the screen and talk us through what empathy interviews are?
Absolutely. I'm also just acknowledging, look at all the folks joining us even just now. And let's see, share my screen. And actually go ahead and stop sharing screen. My goal today is to stay off the PowerPoint as much as possible. And I'll just start with welcoming you all. My name is Travis Wentworth. I go by he, him pronouns. Joining you all from the ancestral lands of the Squaxin Island tribes today. And just happy to be here. So I'm Data Practices Project Manager with the Office of System School Improvement. So in my work, I work mostly with the 9 ESDs, Educational Service Districts, and continuous improvement partners. I see many of my partners even in the room. So just happy to have you all here. I see colleagues and mentors, friends, and faces, names I have not seen before. So all of you, welcome. Oh, my audio is a little shaky. I'll try to adjust my audio. Keep me accountable on my audio, and we'll keep moving. So with that, wanted to talk about empathy interviews. And the very first thing I thought of when I saw the content of designing an ideal empathy interview was just that word, that very first word, ideal. And I did it again. I threw off my punchline. I always say things in reverse, but still, I'll introduce my little brain teaser here. And as I go through the day, please use the chat. I want this to be as two-way engaging as possible. I'll ask questions throughout. So just an opening question, what do these two images make? Awesome. Lots of great comments in the chat. So I am known for what are often called dad jokes, although my wife tells them too. So are they mom jokes or parental jokes? I don't know. But yeah, and ideas, and you throw in some eels, and now we have some ideals. So I wanted to center on ideals for a moment. A colleague of mine shared that what you shed light on will grow. And this makes me think really strongly of things like appreciative inquiry, where we're building on something that's working well, something that's strong, doing well. And when I think ideal, this is the most appreciative inquiry we can possibly be, because we're focusing on what is that hope for the future that we want to make a reality. And that's what we want to shed light on. The very first question, though, is how do we know what that ideal is? So I'll share a couple more slides, and then again, I want to turn off the camera. As I enter this space, I want to enter this space as a learner as well. I find empathy interviews a very important topic, and I wanted to introduce it and give us some space to explore it together. If you've seen me present before, you've probably seen this slide because I use it all the time. And I've shared it backwards and forwards, and this is the first time I'm going to start with the middle. And I talked about ideal, which I'm going to compare to a vision. It's a vision for the future that we would like to make a reality. But again, I asked that same question, where does that vision come from? Well, it comes from our hopes for the future, which is centered in our values and our current realities. But we don't all come from the same cultural background, the same lived experiences. We don't have the same reality or the same values. So when I think of why empathy interviews, it's to gain that deeper understanding of our community, the diverse values in our systems, in our staff, students, families, etc., our colleagues, and allowing that deeper understanding to inform what our values are, our hopes, our ideal, so that it's not my ideal, but it's our ideal. And that in turn, that vision frames our goals that we set for ourselves in our system, and they lead to the questions we want to ask and the data we look at. So the very first thing I think of, starting with why even talk about empathy interviews, it's to gain this deeper understanding and inclusion of voice. It's to challenge our biases and our individual perspectives that lead to our current areas of focus. Let me offer one more visual to talk a little bit about why I think we should focus on empathy interviews today. I'm going to call it data triangulation. And so when we try to triangulate a certain point, we have to see things from different perspectives. I'll start with the one we're probably most familiar with on this visual, outcome data. In education, we look at outcome data all the time, student outcome data. We see graduation rates, attendance rates, we see assessment scores, we see grades, et cetera, et cetera. These are the outcomes of the system that's designed to get those results. So moving to the opposite of that, now input data. Input data is now all of the things that we apply or add to that system. We have these many teachers that teach these many classes. We teach this curriculum. We have these behavioral supports, mental health supports in our system. These are the things that we add to the system to get to those outcomes. Empathy interviews allows us to lean into that perceptual piece of, yes, we see the same outcome data, but do we see the same things in that data? Do we interpret it the same way? Do we have the same priorities? Same with our input. If we were to look at the different perspectives of our staff, students, family, community, would they have the same thing to say about what we add or input into our system and what we are getting out of our system in terms of outcome data? Well, these are just a couple examples of why. And I want to, again, invite in the chat, why do you use or do you find empathy interviews valuable? I want to share this learning space together. And I'll go off PowerPoint for a moment. Okay. Sharing what I'm seeing in the chat. We have some new to the topic. We did empathy interviews last summer to see how students were feeling about distance learning. Thank you. Opportunity to hear from the people who are the end users of many educational policies. Understand what people are feeling, thinking. Great. So I want to start talking about now what is an empathy interview. And I'll ask your help because, again, I want to challenge our individual biases and perspectives. I may have a definition of empathy, but that is informed by my beliefs, my values. So I want to introduce empathy as what is empathy to you? Go ahead and share in the chat. What is empathy? As you're doing that, I'll share. I wanted to highlight a few key principles in designing empathy interviews. So we'll be talking about some of the less obvious concepts of an empathy interview. And this is going to be a quick dive in, and I'll save as much time as possible for breakout QA and my guest presenter, Bethany. Great, I'll read out off the chat as they're coming in as well, if I can keep up. Empathy is being able to share in someone's feelings, demonstrating understanding of how others feel. Empathy is rooted in loving kindness, allowing yourself to truly experience another person. Empathy to me means understanding, feeling what other people feel, care, do not harm, listen. I see understanding a lot here, not judging, compassion. Thank you. The chat is always open. I like to identify root words and where they come from. And this one's interesting when we put empathy and interview together, because one is a Greek root word and the other is a Latin root-based word. So empathy, M is the Greek root for in, go into, and pathos or pathy is the feeling. So it's really going into that feeling. And then enter for interview is to go between. And view actually has two pieces to it, and they both say to see. So into seeing, into observation. So the four concepts I want to talk about in terms of what is an interview, it is absolutely an interview, an opportunity to interact with one individual, a group of individuals. It's generally very intimate. And when I talk about perceptual feedback, perceptual interaction, there's lots of ways to do that. There's group surveys, feedback loops, communications, emails, etc. Empathy interviews, I would define as really that most intensive, most intimate one-on-one connection. Sometimes it's a small group, maybe 2 or 3, but the smaller the group, the better. And 4 concepts I want to share is that empathy interview is an intentional act of listening. It's observable data, perceptual data, and qualitative data. So it is information, and I always define data as just information that we use to inform our actions. So it's absolutely data. It's also a relationship building strategy. If all your life, all you wanted to do is share your story, and someone's giving you the first opportunity to do that, that is the best example of relationship building I can think of. I think of one of the greatest things is to love and be loved in return. Same thing, I would add listening to that. Greatest thing is to be heard and to hear in return, to be listened to and to listen in return. And finally, it's pursuit of deeper understanding of blank. And we'll start talking about some different ways to use empathy interviews. Alrighty. Next, I want to talk about who to interview. What are some examples in the chat if you've conducted interviews? Who are some individuals that maybe you have already engaged in empathy interviews, that one-on-one interaction? Or what is someone that you actually would like to and haven't yet? Go ahead and just enter in the chat. I saw the example of students, K-12 students last summer, students' parents new to the US, families, school leaders. Haven't done this before. So I tend to answer questions with questions. And when I think of who to interview, whose perceptions or voices have yet been unheard, that's the first thing I want to think about, particularly to elevate those voices that are not feeling heard now as a priority. Next, I think about who have you yet to collaborate or build a strong relationship with. We know that our work is really based in relationships and making those personal connections. And then finally, whose values should be represented in your vision, in your goals, in your plans, in your evaluations of success? Whose values should be heard and represented? I know that's a very inclusive, very ambitious goal in terms of empathy interviews. And so wanted to name that all of our values in our system need to be a part of that planning process. I wanted to here identify a question new to empathy interviews. Is there an example of an empathy interview? So a few that we've seen in the chat include interviewing students on a one-on-one basis to listen to their story as far as what is remote learning during COVID, how that's going, how hybrid is going. Ignoring the topic for a moment, empathy interview is that opportunity to ask questions and engage in listening with a particular audience. Other examples include in our state agency, OSPI, we've engaged in empathy interviews to listen to different staff at different levels of the agency to hear, how's your experience? What are some of your priorities? What are some of your needs? And based on that, we were able to collect a lot of information, a lot of data to inform where should we focus on our professional development next. Those are just some quick examples. Okay, so we talked about why, we talked about what, and we talked about who. I want to dive into the when to use empathy interviews. And when I think about when, I identify sort of 4 stages, and perhaps there are more. So again, I want to enter that as this space as a learner. So if I don't name a when that you were looking for, please enter that in chat. Please add to the conversation. So the 4 areas I identified are the exploring and understanding phase. If we want to understand something new or something we are just entering for the first time, this is a great time to seek deeper understanding from our system, from our colleagues, from our families and our students. So if we're, for example, engaging in root cause analysis, we want to identify what's happening in our system, or we are trying to identify priorities. What are we going to focus on? These are both part of that exploring, understanding our system phase, in which case having diverse perspectives, having diverse values represented are really a must so that we are inclusive from the beginning. The next one I want to talk about is once we identify our priorities, what we're going to focus on, what are the urgencies or needs in our system, then we start to create a plan, an action plan, any type of designing approach. We want to design a structure from the foundation because it's a new structure. Any type of action planning, here again, we're trying to interpret our understanding and apply it to a plan. Is there an opportunity to gain feedback on that plan and hear those multiple values and perspectives in that planning stage? Next, I want to talk about implementing. We have a plan, now we're implementing it. And I heard this example a few times in the chat. How's it going? How is hybrid, remote, the interaction between both, and now many of us are going into in-person. How is that going? What are the needs? Does this change anything? Is there any perceptions that would influence a change in our plan or encourage us to continue our plan? The last example I want to offer is evaluation. We've implemented a new change. We've done it for a number of time, maybe a year. How did we do? And I find this one absolutely critical in the sense of our own perceptions or bias in terms of we did well could very easily lead us to a positive assumption or a negative assumption. I want to name both. And without asking our students or families, we only have one part of that story. Those are some examples of when I wanted to name: understanding, planning, implementing, evaluating. And again, I want to invite, did I miss anything? I'm a little choppy from allergies. Chat is always open. I'm going to go ahead and move on just about at time here. I wanted to discuss how a little bit. And this is again, I'm just talking about some of those designing principles. At the end, you'll have a couple of resources that offer some starting place templates to design one from scratch. So I want to acknowledge that this could be an entire day session. I want to catch up on chat for a moment. I haven't done this, but I think it would be really helpful for students in foster care. I love that example. If I am missing anything in the chat, please let me know. I'd like to interview my new Level Up College Ready students next year. Do this with my team every year. I think it's important to name that when asking these questions, it needs to be without there being a right or wrong answer. Oh, Anna, your comment's actually very well timed. People can read signals and may feel pressure to tell us what we want to hear. Absolutely. So the very first question I want to address, and again, I always answer question with questions. I don't know if that's my inquiry mindset of always ask questions. So when I talk about how, the very first question I want to ask is, should an interview, an empathy interview, meet the needs of the interviewer or the interviewee? Just pause there for a moment. Should this interview meet the needs of the interviewer or the interviewee? And I ask this question when we start thinking about, as we design the empathy interview, we have to consider the needs of who we're interviewing, as well as our intent of what we're trying to do. So the very first principle I would say in designing an empathy interview is sharing your intent, but also inviting their intent. So my intent is to learn about this. Maybe I've never interviewed you before. Maybe this is a very first time in relationship building. Maybe we've done it a number of times and now we're actually familiar with each other. These are both very different scenarios. In which case, if someone is being heard for the very first time, the most important thing to do is listen and develop that relationship. And in Anna's comments and a couple other comments I've seen, it's very easy to box the individual or groups you're interviewing to a specific answer, asking some of those questions that only lead to one possible answer. You could just as easily have given them two Padlets to say yes or no. Paddles, I was trying to say paddles. So watching out for how we design questions to be very open-ended and allow that listening to occur. And when we share our intent, inviting them to share what's on their minds and hearts today, how does that inform how they are showing up? And that's a very, very important step of that relationship building and feeling heard. Next I want to talk about is listening is more important than having your question answered. Listening is more important than having your question answered. You may have asked a question and you don't feel like you're getting the response you're hoping for or looking for. Want to lean into that. Maybe they'll connect it later. Maybe they won't. The most important thing is they're feeling heard for the very first time. So when we interrupt or try to shift back to, I hear what you're saying, let's get you back to this question, Am I really listening to what they're saying? I'm only looking for a response to the question I'm asking. Next thing I want to share is really about designing the question. So thinking about really three things as we design questions: inviting collaboration. I'm asking this question because I value your beliefs, your values, your opinions, your perceptions, and I want to invite you as a partner and collaborator in whatever the initiative is, in just understanding. Next is relationship building. Design questions, don't just design questions all about a program. Make sure there's an opportunity to build that relationship. And ensure that you have an opportunity to explore the interviewee's values. I would say these are most definitely that first time interview, you want to focus more on the relationship piece. And if you have a strong relationship from the beginning, it's going to be much easier to open up and answer questions more directly later on. So in a moment, I think I'm a little over time. In a moment, I would like us to, we're going to ask a poll actually, just to get a sense of the room. Some of you have already shared, you're new to empathy interviews. Some have used them before. So we want to just kind of gauge a frequency. How often do you use empathy interviews? And then after that, we will engage in a breakout room where you'll have a chance to identify an audience you would like to apply an empathy interview strategy to, and design a couple of questions. The poll is open now. 2 questions: have you used empathy interviews before? And how often do you offer empathy interviews?
Thank you, Travis. Do you want to start sharing screen again? And can you start at the polling question?
Yeah. No.
Thank you. And then Travis, while they're taking the poll, how many minutes do you want the breakout rooms to be?
I believe we were going to go for 15 minutes. Let's try 15 minutes.
Okay.
I'll just give this a pause while the voting's in place. Again, the chat is open for any additions, questions, comments, and we will also have some additional QA time. The 15 minutes of conversation is not enough time to be, I would say, experts at empathy interviews. It takes a lot of time, and most importantly, practice, practice, practice. As I'm seeing the poll, I also wanted to name thinking about staff as well.
Yeah, the earlier poll, Travis said that mostly administrators, school counselors, psychologists, school social workers. We had other, which is always kind of hard for us to gauge, but maybe our community partners.
Alrighty. Let's see. I can go ahead and share results for a moment.
Yep.
All right. So in a moment, we're going to enter into breakout rooms. And the prompts are to identify a specific audience, identify your intent, and design 2 questions. We'll have a Padlet link where I would like to encourage you to add the questions that you're identifying, keeping them at least one of those questions focused on the welcoming relationship building. And then consider another question that can be very open-ended regarding your intent. You're not limited to 2. I just wanted to share, in interest of time, designing 2. Take a moment with your group to just identify your questions and introduce yourselves, meet someone new, and share your questions.
So Travis, we have a Padlet, and I think Ronnie's going to put the link in the chat. So if people want to open the Padlet and add their responses as they meet, and I'm going to open the rooms if you're ready.
I'll just take one moment. If you're new to Padlet, links in the chat, and you can use this plus icon in the bottom right to add a comment, and you can maybe share your intent in the title and write your question. And so this will just be a nice collage of all of our questions. All righty, let's go into breakout.
Okay. If you end up in a breakout room without someone in it, please come back to the main room and we'll make sure you get to a group that needs additional participants. If you don't want to participate, go ahead and stay in the main room. Thank you.
Sorry, Bunny, I clicked out. Could you send me back to room 28?
Sure, Gloria, hang on.
You're looking good today in that red.
Thank you. Okay, Gloria. I'm gonna try and get you to go back there. Move to room 20. Yeah. Okay, Gloria, down on your toolbar, there should be a little thing that says breakout rooms.
Yes,
And if you click on that, you should be able to rejoin 28.
thank you, though.
You bet.
It's room 5. I'm moving a couple of people that are singles.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. Anybody else in the main room that needs help?
Sorry, I was in 22 and got booted out. Can I go back to 22?
Sure. Stephanie, do you have a little in your toolbar at the bottom? Do you have
I don't see it on there, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened. But
Which one are you in right now? Which one are you in right now?
22, she
Oh,
said.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, you bet.
Linda Callis needs to move, I think.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, got her. I don't see any other singles. Oh, there's one. Victoria.
And I see Courtney too.
Victoria Elizondo, I'm going to move you to room 33. Okay, that worked.
No one was in my room. Hollis Amston here.
What room are you in, dear?
I don't remember the number, maybe 31.
Okay. Let me find you real quick. Yeah, there you are. Okay, I will move you.
My room was also empty.
Robin?
Is that Robin?
Okay.
Yeah.
And elementary.
Robin.
Okay. There you go, Hollis. Room 10.
Robin, do you remember what room you were in?
I don't. I just sat there for a minute and then I had a phone call. So I paused everything. and then hopped back out.
Robin, you're in room 20.
Okay.
What grade level are you?
I'm K-12. I'm a school site.
Okay, we'll just put you up here in room 18, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Yep. Oh, Catherine's all alone. Catherine, are you all alone in room 16? I'll move you to room 22. They're a little light. Okay.
For those of you that are just joining us, we are in breakout rooms for about the next 6 minutes. If you would like to be placed in a breakout room, please feel free to unmute and let us know, or you can message Ronnie or I in the chat. We'll get you put into a room. Otherwise, feel free to hang tight and we'll be back in about 6 minutes.
So our breakout rooms are closing here in just a few seconds and people will start wandering back in. Welcome.
Hello. Go ahead, Bonnie.
No, you go ahead. I was just welcoming everybody back and hoping they had a good conversation in their breakout rooms.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, one of the things that culturally informed communication habit is I never liked interrupting people. So actually, Zoom host is one of my least favorite things ever because I get to interrupt all kinds of people at the same time. I hope at least you got to meet someone new, make a great connection, and also the Padlet is still there available to see some of the responses, see some of the questions, get some ideas. So let's go ahead and re-add that into the chat if you wanted to review the Padlet for responses. I want to give as much time to my guest speaker today, Bethany Martinez. And just to share a quick visual of, I do have a couple of resources, and I wanted to just share one to really help with, this is a tool for how to conduct empathy interviews. It does offer some text as well to introduce. It allows you to identify your why, talk about a lot of the same things that we were able to introduce today. So I didn't want you to walk away without a resource or feeling like you're on your own. And also, I know I'll have contact info shared in a bit. With that, let me go ahead and share my screen. And go ahead, Bethany.
All right, give me just a minute to get myself situated here. All right. Let me see, maybe I can do this. My technology skills, not so good sometimes. So hola, buenos días. Es un placer y un honor estar aquí presente con ustedes hoy. Me llamo Bethany Martinez y trabajo con la gente maravillosa de Mattawa, Washington. Hello, good morning. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all today and to be learning alongside everybody with Travis. I am Bethany Martinez, as he said. I'm the Director of Multilingual and Multicultural Services here in Mattawa, Washington. I get to work with some amazing families and people. And I am joining you today from the traditional lands of both the Yakima and the Wanapum. So I had to think long and hard about why I was the one that was asked to share about empathy interviews. And I think, like a lot of you at the beginning, I saw, well, this is new to me. I'm not sure. I'm learning about this as well. And as I talked with Travis over the last few weeks, I realized that I was doing a lot of this without actually knowing that's what it was called. So if you could click to the next slide. I wanted to just share a little bit about how I got involved in all of this. And so I came to it, I think, through a pretty organic way. First and foremost, as a parent and as a wife. My husband, Juan, in that first picture is a teacher here in Wahluke as well. And he was a newcomer student here. He graduated from Wahluke High School and is now teaching new to the US students. And he has helped develop my skill of listening. I think we often partner with somebody whose strengths are our areas for growth. And he is definitely somebody who has helped me learn how to listen. And then we have our 3 wonderful children there. As a teacher for over 18 years, and I've taught every grade from kinder through college. During those years, I have learned to listen to my students, and that my students, even the youngest of them, have so much insight to share with us. And the picture that you see over there is 3 of my Academia dos Mundos students got to do the pleasure of teaching a bilingual teacher academy class, and I learned so much from them. And then listening to their parents, right, coming alongside and partnering with them. And then as a federal programs director here, learning and listening to my amazing staff. When I first stepped into this role, I spent a day just listening to their stories and really starting to define what it is that we believe collectively. And then this past year, we've been doing a book study together, and they've been actually leading a lot of the learning. And then along with that, obviously, my parent officers in the migrant program. And I promise, if you stick with me, this will all circle back around to empathy interviews, but it's going to kind of take us on a little bit of a journey. So if you could click the next slide. When I first started in Wahluke, I actually got assigned here as a student teacher. I had 2 choices. One was go back to Olympia. I'm Olympia born and raised, and go to your old high school and live with your parents, or go somewhere completely different and try something new. And as a 20-year-old, I was like, I don't want to go live with my parents. So I came to Wahluke, and I had no idea. Where is Mattawa? What is Wahluke? So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot. So we're about 2,500 students. We're continually growing. And these 3 programs or demographics that you see here, those are the ones that my department works with specifically. So we have our migrant families, we have our English language learners, and then we have our McKinney-Vento students, our students experiencing housing instability or homelessness. And as you can see here, we have about just over half of our students are in our migrant program. And that means that they've made a move in the last 3 years, right, for either fishing or agricultural work. About half of our students are receiving services for English language development, right? And then we have our 12% that are experiencing some sort of housing instability. And I share this to help just ground us in the fact that every single one of our districts is very unique. So I want to just invite you in the moment to just think about the district that you serve, and maybe what is in the chat 1 or 2 things that makes your district unique. Oh, over 100 languages spoken, lots of diversity, rural logging community, yes. Hugely diverse, I love it, yes, all right. Widespread and diverse, 1 school, 1 class per grade level, you get to know them very well. Fabulous, thank you so much for all of your sharing. I'm going to have to write down some of this later and make some connections with some of you. So this is data, right, that came from the OSPI report card. But data doesn't always tell us the whole story. So if we look just at our English language learners here, we might make the assumption that, well, 50% are designated as English language learners. So that other 50%, they must be either native English speakers or fully proficient, right? And it doesn't give us, like I said, the full picture. So if you go to the next slide, I want us to look a little deeper at languages in Wahluke. So if we look at our home language surveys, we look at all of those 3 questions that we ask as our families are enrolling. 93% of our students have Spanish as their home language. 7% have English as their home language, but even those, quite a large portion of them still have Spanish in the household. And then we have less than 0.3%, but we do have those who, and actually growing percentage that are coming to us speaking Concobal, Quiche, other dialects and languages. Yep, Mom as well, yes. And so as we look at this bigger picture, we really had to start doing some shifting in our mindset to an asset-based stance around our multilingual learners. And I share this with you because this is something that I think that we're really working hard on to do. A lot of times people, like when I started at the beginning, I spoke a little bit of Spanish, and people, when they see me speak Spanish, go, "Oh my gosh, like your Spanish is amazing. This is fabulous. How did you learn it?" And they go on and on and on and make a big deal about it. But when a student walks into our door speaking Spanish or another language, the default is to go to kind of a deficit thinking and, oh, they're an English learner. They're going to need this support. They're going to need all of these additional things. They're already behind. And so even when I mentioned about the class that I taught, right, my students, when we were working on our funds of knowledge and they were listing all of the assets and all of the skills that they and their parents bring to our community, they did not list language. And when I asked them, "Well, why aren't any of you mentioning that you speak Spanish?" "Oh, my Spanish isn't that good. My English isn't that good either." And so helping them, right? Like what message have we been sending? These are seniors that are on their way out of our district, and they have internalized a message, right, that their language is not an asset. And so we are really, really working hard here to shift that narrative, right? Celebrate all they bring, intentionally make some of those cross-linguistic connections. And so as in my role, I knew that meant that we needed to communicate with parents differently and our different stakeholders. So my team that you saw in that first picture, they are all bilingual, biliterate. And when we run our events, we actually run our events primarily in Spanish. And we're going to get more to that in just 1 minute. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about, right, like my family, my staff, my students, but I really want to focus on these amazing individuals that you see on the screen right here. This is my core PAC officers. The migrant program has a parent advisory council, and these are the parents that have been elected as officers, and they are our connection to our community and to our families. And even myself, my assistant, and all of them, right, we live here, but we have different circles. And so therefore we're able to amplify different voices and different perspectives. And we work really hard on bringing all of that back. So any decision that I make in my department goes through these people. I don't spend a penny without bringing it to them. I don't change services without bringing it to them and allowing them to go out, get input, and bring it back to our team. You can stop sharing the slides now, and I'm just going to talk. There we go. I like seeing faces. So I just wanted to talk you through like a typical officers meeting. And so first and foremost, we always feed everybody. It is important, right, that we have our basic needs met so we can get to the work that we really want to do. And we make sure that we have a schedule that works for them. So sometimes our parents are running straight from work here. So we want to make sure that they have some food and are able to kind of relax for a moment, connect, and then we get into our work. And as I mentioned previously, we offer our meetings in Spanish. We do have English dominant members of our team, but everybody is bilingual and is comfortable doing that work in Spanish. And then those guests who we invite in, we offer them the opportunity to have English interpretation as needed. And I think that says a lot to status of language and just gets us really in the right mindset to get the work going. We set a clear agenda and we stick to it, but we also appreciate and acknowledge the fact that there are tangents and natural flows of the conversation. But the biggest thing I think is the fact that the parents are the ones running these meetings. My assistant Norma is fabulous, and she is there taking minutes and keeping us all on track. I am there and I participate when it is stated in the agenda, but this is a meeting run by the parents. They are advising me. And so it is their voices that need to be heard. And we actually have districts come in and watch and are coming just to see whose voice is heard the most, right? Because I think somebody said it in the chat before, right? The one that is doing the speaking is doing the learning. So if I'm just sitting here then and doing all the talking, are we really getting to what we need to? I was asked, well, why did you start looking at parent voice, or how did this come across? And so OSPI does a consolidated program review, or a CPR, for all of the different programs in each district every 3 to 4 years. And when they came here 3 or 4 years ago, one of the findings that they had was, you're checking the box. Yeah, you have a parent committee. Yeah, you have parent officers, but you're not doing much more than just informing them and moving on. And so OSPI came in and they were fabulous, and they really supported the current federal programs director at the time. And they were able to get some good momentum going. And I stepped in and got to take advantage, right, of the hard work that had been started and continue the work. One thing that I noticed is that our parents really trust the school. They trust us as professionals here. And so we had to teach them the system and create intentional spaces for their voices to be heard, and help them feel confident in sharing their voice. And I do believe that empathy interviews are a beautiful way of helping them start to feel that their voice is valued, and they're going to start advocating more and more for their students. My husband gave me the example. He and I were talking last night, and he goes, I know better. Like, I know better, right? I grew up here. I am representative of the students and of the parents that we serve. I know better, but my default was, here's a parent conference. Here's how your child is doing. Do you have any questions? And they never had questions. He goes, so I had to shift this year and just come alongside them and just say, how are you doing? How can I support you? And listen to them. And as he goes, as I shut my mouth intentionally and listen, we became partners in the child's learning. He goes, and what I'm seeing in my data and my students, he goes, is night and day. And it's nothing different that I did in the classroom. It's that part where I built that connection to the parents. And so think about how we make that shift, right? Because like, I'm in the district office, it's go, 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 but I've been in the buildings and it was go, 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 right? And so how we do that is really by being intentional in practicing this. So we knew that we needed some help. And I saw some faces here from our ESD. We brought in our ESD. We're over in ESD 105, so amazing people out of Yakima. We worked with Lupe Ledesma at OSPI, and she trained up our parents. I mean, huge shout out to the migrant department there. They really, really helped our parents understand their role as parent leaders. And then we practiced, and in our agendas, we made little comments of who needed to speak or where a motion needed to be made. And then I coached up I won't say my assistant Norma is amazing, and she coached up our president, right, on how he could prompt with questioning. And so I'm going to come back full circle now, and I want to get us back to empathy interviews, right? So we are still learning this as well. And so I was super excited to be able to listen and learn from Travis, and I'm going to be looking at several of those resources that he shared. Actually, that last one that he shared is the one that I had already printed out and marked up, because what my parent officers and I want to do is we are getting ready to do our end of the year survey with parents. And we want to look at those results and decide, where do we want to dig deeper? Where do we go, I need more here, right? And from there, we're going to spend our summer conducting empathy interviews around those. So talking to our neighbors and listening to them, our compadres, our co-workers, right? And myself, my team, and those parent officers. That's what we're going to spend our summer doing, is just gathering information from our community. And when we come back in the fall, then we can bring that back and look at our systems and really start to make plans for change. What is working well? How are they feeling supportive? And so some of the questions, I sat there watching your guys' Padlet, because I was like, I need some good questions too. Like, let me see. So I wrote down a few fabulous ones that I heard that might, I think, resonate with me. I'm going to bring it back to them as a team also, right? But what are your strengths? I thought about asking, what are your student strengths? Like, how would you like to be supportive? And then some of the questions that we're hoping to use are, tell me about a positive experience you've had in our district. Describe a teacher or a staff member that did a great job connecting to your students' learning. What did that look like? What are the best or worst parts about communicating with your student's teacher and or school? What is one thing you wish your school could do better to connect your family into your learning experience? So some things like that. Oh, good question. Yes, when you listen, you connect. Yes, breaking bread is incredibly powerful. I'm looking at this. How do we manage this? Yeah, so I think that is gonna be a good one, right? So somebody put, Andrea put in the chat, I find I do a lot of listening, but it can bring us both down. Do you guide it afterwards? Do you look for positives? I think that's gonna go back to a lot of what Travis was talking about and in our intents. And I think as we were talking about how we want to do our questions, I do think that we want to bring it back to maybe like some next steps, or even sharing with them some of the things that we've heard and want to work towards. So yeah, I think that is something that we're going to have to work on. But I do like, yeah, Robin, exactly right. The best and worst options. I do want them to share things that have gone well too, right? Like we want to know what we're doing well so we can continue to grow that in addition to what needs to be fixed. And it's so easy for us to default to the negative. And so when we're asking for them to share a positive too, I think that might be a really good idea. So I thought I'd share just some changes that we've actually made as a result of really listening to our community and to our parents. So one thing that we do, well, every year, as I mentioned before, we do our end of the year surveys. And in the last few years, one of the things that kept coming up was drug prevention information, drug and alcohol abuse, and what things I need to look for as a parent. So we have partnered along with our community coalition and brought them in several times to share and to answer questions. Another thing that we've done is we used to serve our migrant math and reading interventions after school as an add-on in addition to the school day. And a lot of our parents said there's barriers to my kids participating. What we're seeing is not the gains that we would like to. So we actually are in the process of shifting for next year and actually hiring paraeducators and some teachers to be able to support migrant during the school day. And then one other thing that's come up as a result of this pandemic and all of our Zooms and all of our having our kids home even more is they've just opened up about the need for some mindfulness and some mental health supports. And so our PAC meeting later this month is actually going to all be geared around
I
that.
didn't mean to interrupt. I left another meeting.
Okay. And then I wanted to share, we are in the process here because we've had a large influx of new to the US students. And so we're in the process of creating a secondary newcomer center. And we sat down with the parents and did pretty much what Travis has been talking about. We just listened to them and we asked them, what are your concerns or your hopes for your students? What are the supports that you need? And we just started taking notes of all of this stuff. And the one thing that they kept coming back to was the ability to be able to communicate directly with this teacher, to come alongside them and be able to really tell their story and help them know how to best support their student. And so one promise that we made to them was that we would hire a bilingual, biliterate staff member. And I'm very happy to announce that the board approved that person last night. And I will be able to now to go back to those parents and say, hey, I want you to meet this person, right? This is a fabulous young lady who is here and who can talk directly with you. And there's like that awkward silence when you ask, especially because this was in a small group setting, right? And there's that awkward silence of like, who's going to share first? Even like watching the chat when we put that in, right? We're like, okay, who's going to be the first one to put something in the chat? But being okay and comfortable with that, they started opening up. And once one opened up, right, then the next opened up. And it led to an amazing conversation where I probably talked twice in about a half an hour time period, but the parents talked. And so if I would think about what advice I would want to give people starting this work, I think back to the 4 whens that Travis shared, right? Just knowing what is it that, where am I at on this? Am I looking and then just exploring? Am I planning and designing something? Am I implementing something? Am I wanting to evaluate it? And knowing my why, what is my intent? And then I love the fact that he mentioned offering them a space to share their intent as well, and start small, right? I have a real bad tendency to want to go 100 miles an hour and jump all the way in, but I've learned from others, right? To just start small, pick a small group, do a couple, try one of them out, right? And then train and practice. And we are all still learning in this. I think this is something that I have so many notes listening to you guys, reading your chats in the comments. I am looking for ways to improve in this. And I hope that it spreads, not just from migrant, right? Here, my hope is that this spreads out throughout our district here, and then that we're all doing this work together. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my journey with you. I hope that it was helpful. And then Travis, and Bonnie, I'm here open for questions or anything. But I just, again, thank you guys for sharing with me. I was honestly at the beginning, just like, why empathy interviews? Why me? But then the more I learned about it, the more I thought, okay, well, we do a lot of this. We just didn't know that's what it was called.
Thank you, Bethany. Travis, do you have anything you want to add?
You just open up for QA for both of us, and I wanted to share an example of a question. Empathy interviews can be fun too. And I see Mary Adams, you're on the line. You asked in one of our practice learning sessions an empathy interview question. The very first one you asked me was, what animal reminds you of math? And we still laugh at this question to this day. The very first answer that came to mind was a peacock mantis shrimp. And some people think it's three animals. It's actually one animal. It's a peacock colored mantis shrimp. Anyway, it was a fun question, and it gave us a good laugh. It can be fun.
So Matt earlier put a question in the chat. He said in their breakout room, a question that came up is it an appropriate and reliable data collection technique for very young students? And is there a good age for starting using empathy interviews with the elementary students?
I love this question, and I want to encourage everyone to add in as well. We actually saw this question in our breakout too and started to reflect on it. So I have a 6-year-old daughter, and actually when she was 4, I brought her to one of our conferences at OSPI, and she's listening to this school district talk about behavior, and she's responding too. She's sharing with me, I have behavioral problems, I have behavioral issues. And when they asked if anyone had any question, her hand was the first one up. So I put her on my shoulders, like, you want to ask a question in front of 200 people, you go for it. And she said, I like this. I need help with my behavior, and I'm scared to go to kindergarten. I was in tears, like, this is my 4-year-old daughter. So to me, I'm going to bias in my response and saying 3, 4, as soon as they can talk, they have something to say. That's my take. Anyone else?
I'll just echo what you said, Travis. I work with our migrant preschool. I'll spend a lot of time in our kindergarten classes, and they want to be heard. And when we give them a chance to be heard, from our littlest littles up to our, up to our seniors in high school, right? They want to be heard. And so I would say, yeah, absolutely, any age.
If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Yeah, knowledge speaks, wisdom listens. You're absolutely right, Andrea. Well, while you're thinking, we're going to have some time at the end that we can answer questions. Travis, I'm going to take control of the screen again and share a few resources, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You're okay with that? Good. think I have to change my display settings again.
And as Bonnie's doing that question in the chat, Heather, yes, I'll post that link right now. And there's some additional resources she's going to share in just a moment. And this is one of those. So a lot of the talking points we got to today, we wanted to be very, very personal, very much out of the PowerPoint if we can today. A lot of those talking points are in the slide deck. So you will still get access to those slides, those visuals that we've created to represent those talking points.
Absolutely. The PowerPoint is, Liz, it's housed on the Gate Equity webinar webpage. So anytime you want to share this with your colleagues, if you want to use it for review, we're happy that you can use it. It's on the share, or it's on the webpage. I think Ronnie will share that link in the chat. And so one of the things we'd like to ask at the end of our webinars, we ask you to consider discussing your ideas with your leadership, share your ideas with your PLC, or lead a discussion with students. And this one I think is most important today. We talking about empathy interviews, lead a discussion with your students. And if you have a next step in mind, share it in the chat. So I'm going to launch another poll quickly before all of you have to jump off, and that is our GATE evaluation. If you can take just a few minutes and answer this for us. We're planning for next year. We do read all the evaluations and use the results for planning, you know, keeping continuous improvement in mind. Be honest with us, please. So go ahead and take a few minutes and answer that. Again, you have to answer all the questions before hitting submit, or we won't get the results. Resources. So did you want to talk about the resources, Travis, or do you want me to do it?
I might need help. Well, let me go ahead and get started. So we wanted to represent some examples of funding sources, Title I and LAP, parent and family engagement, as well as we wanted to acknowledge actually ESSER funds aren't on here either, system of school improvement funds. We wanted to brainstorm some options for funds because empathy interviews, you know, takes time. It takes some intentional planning. And then in terms of the articles, the first one about empathy interviews is the learningforward.org site. The high-tech, high synopsis empathy interviews, that's a lot of the content research actually behind used in the improvement science curriculum. So I wanted to include both of those links. We wanted to also acknowledge our OSPI migrant bilingual education. I really first just want to thank Lupe for introducing me to Bethany. One thing I love about this is meeting new people and just making the connections. So Bethany, we're going to stay in touch for sure. And as well as there's a link here if you need more support or want to follow up, feel free to reach out. My email will be available in chat as well. Did I miss anything in resources?
No, the Get Personalized Help button at the bottom is one that we've used for a number of years. It's on our webpage. We call it the green button. You click it, it's a survey, you answer the questions and hit submit, and it comes to us. And even if we aren't the right people to answer your questions, we will find who needs to get in touch with you or who you can contact for assistance. And we have the System and School Improvement newsletter, and we're going to drop the link in there. We also have archived all of our previous newsletters. There's a really nice welcome video of our assistant superintendent, Veronica, and she was the director of Migrant and Bilingual, and so this information is right in her wheelhouse, and the message is really nice. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, we're going to drop that link in the chat as well. And again, Kathy Anderson, bless her heart, we miss her. She'll be back soon, I hope. She is the Graduation Equity Program Supervisor at OSPI. Travis, the Data Practices Project Manager. And Bethany, we thank you so much. She's the Director of Multilingual Multicultural Services at Wahluke School District. And next year, we're going to kick off August. This is our last webinar, morning webinar for the year, for the school year. We'll kick off our new series in August with highlighting attendance. The registration link is not available yet, but we have all of your email addresses. So we'll make sure that you get the link to register for next year. And then this afternoon, if you can join us this afternoon, it's Improvement Science 201, Driving Equitable Supports with the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI. RJ Monton and Liza Hartland, both assistant directors here at OSPI, will be our presenters, and we hope you can join us. And then we just want to thank you all for being here. We know that you're super busy. It's June, school's almost out. We want to thank you for all your hard work this year. It was a difficult year for everybody, and we really, really appreciate you.
We have a couple more minutes if there are any last questions, comments. I did see, Ron, I didn't get to your question, defining characteristics of empathy interviews over other ways of getting feedback, such as focus groups, typical interviews, etc. And I suppose my mind wants to create in somewhat of a pyramid, essentially, but empathy interviews being that most impersonal, or strongest strategy of developing a relationship. It is also the most time intensive as well. So I think creating that two-way feedback loop is important regardless of the tool you're using, but also really thinking about the questions you're asking. Because if it's a yes/no answer, surveys are great for that. If it's something, if we really want to make a connection and engage in that deeper understanding, I would say empathy interviews is that best approach, and especially initial approach, because you want to develop that trust and relationship first, which is going to make it easier to gather feedback in other ways. Ron, did you want to add to that question, or I'm speaking somewhat vaguely, I think.
Oh no, I think that's a good response, Travis. Thank you.
And if you remember Ron, he's another guest presenter with me previously. So nice to have you here, Ron.
My pleasure.
We'll hang around for a few more minutes, but I think we're going to stop recording now. And if you have any additional questions, we'll be here to answer them for just another minute or two. And we want to thank you again for being here.
I know Oberon wanted to say hi. I'm still trying to call him a puppy, but he's not really a puppy. Oh, he's turning 6 months this weekend. I'm sorry for waking you.
I also want to thank Tony Brownell for being here with us today. He made this a pleasure. Seamless. He knew what to do when we struggled, and as usual, got us going in the right direction.
Glad to be here and help. Thanks, Bonnie.